Welcome back everyone. Today I'm going to review The Emergency, A Personal History by Coomi Kapoor. It is a very interesting book about the emergency which was imposed in India in 1975 by Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. And it is a personal history of the emergency because the author herself was a victim of the emergency because her husband was also a fellow journalist who did some works which were not liked by the Prime Minister herself, and then her brother-in-law, Mr. Subramaniam Swami, was a member of parliament from Jan Sangh, which was the opposition in the parliament. And all of this also led to a lot of suffering that was personally caused, suffering and victimization that was personally caused to the author herself. And the author herself is a journalist. She was a journalist with the Indian Express, which was a defiant newspaper which did not agree to each and every diktat that was issued by the government and chose not to crawl. And that is one of the other reasons that she and her husband, who was also a journalist with the Indian Express, had to face the wrath of the government. Now the author Coomi Kapoor is the contributing editor of the Indian Express at present. And if you are a regular reader of the Indian Express, then she writes a very interesting column bi-weekly, and the name of the column is not there is no name of that column, but she writes about insider news, about a lot of things that may have happened during the course of those 14 days. It's more like a juicy gossip column, because in that column you get to know about a lot of things about politicians or some other famous person that you otherwise don't know, or the newspapers don't report, or the newspapers even don't get to know about them. The book has been forwarded by Arun Jaitley, who himself was a victim of during the emergency. He was also marginalized. He was incarcerated for a very long period of time. Now let's talk about the book chapter by chapter in a very brief way. The name of the first chapter is Darkness at Dawn. Now this chapter talks about how the emergency came to be imposed. There were many events in the recent past that were worrying for Mrs. Gandhi, and that eventually all piled up, and she became very insecure and she imposed emergency. Now in 1974, students in Gujarat launched a violent movement against the Gujarat CM, who hailed from Congress party. His name was Chimanbhai Patel. And they were accusing him of corruption, and ultimately he had to resign because of this fierce protest by the students. And then there was a movement that was launched by students in Bihar, and the name of that Sangathan was Bihar's Chhatra Sangharsh Samiti, and that also was creating a lot of issues for Congress party. And then they invited Jayaprakash Narayan to lead this movement against the government. And then George Fernandez, who was a union leader, called for a strike of the railway employees, and that impacted railways for weeks on end. And it was a very successful movement in a way, because the whole railway came to a halt, and it was a big problem for the government. Then the government came down very heavily on the whole movement and quelled the dissent and the strikes by using the whole state machinery in a very oppressive way. And then in 1975, something very personal, a personal blow came to her, and that was that the Allahabad High Court declared her election from Rai Bareli as invalid because she was convicted of some unfair practices which directly impacted her election as an MP. And because she was an MP, and that's why she was the Prime Minister, she had to if she had to resign from her from her membership of Parliament because of this, she also would have to resign as the Prime Minister. And some other things that also happened. She had lost elections in Gujarat on the same day, and one of her very close aides had also passed away in the morning on the same day. So 3 things happened on the same day, and that must have been very pressurizing for her. And all of her career was at stake. All of her political journey was at stake, because everybody knows that in politics, if once you vacate a chair and give it to someone else, there's no guarantee that that person is going to give it back to you, hand it back to you when you may be cleared of charges, or the appeal that you are filing in the Supreme Court is successful and you are back as the member of parliament. And that is the exact reason that she didn't want to vacate her chair of the prime minister, and she wanted that the whole judgment should be stayed by the Supreme Court. And then she approached the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court was on vacation, so there was a single judge bench which heard her petition and gave her a conditional stay, which effectively meant that she could attend the parliament but could not vote there. She could remain the prime minister, but a prime minister being not the member of the parliament is like very humiliating for anyone. She was also very humiliated about it, and that's how she decided that she will have to do something to save her throne. And then the next chapter is called The Midnight Knock. Now this chapter is about how so many of the opposition leaders were arrested at midnight, and most of them were in Delhi, because last night they had attended a huge rally at Ramlila Maidan where thousands and thousands of people had gathered to listen to them. And then the next chapter is The Media Muzzled. Now, one of the things that happened during the emergency was that the media was muzzled, like quite properly. The censorship was at its zenith, and that's exactly what happened. Now, there were very few newspapers that tried to defy this censorship. Now, one of them is the Indian Express and the other is the Statesman. Indian Express is the newspaper where the author also worked. Now, there are some things like how Mr. Advani said that when the government asked these people these media persons to bend, they started to crawl, and that's exactly happened. But there are these two very honorable exceptions that chose not to crawl, but I would say that bent but didn't crawl. Then the next chapter is called A Strange New World. Now this talks about the new kind of environment that was created in the whole country. People who were from the right or from the opposition were ostracized by their own friends. Nobody was ready to help them, nobody wanted to even talk to them, and that was the kind of the environment that was prevailing in the country. Now the author herself talks about a lot of incidents where some people didn't want to talk to her, some neighbor or someone, some taxi driver would not want to ferry her from one place to another, because then the taxi person would know that that they will be questioned by the police. Then the next chapter is called A Black Diwali. Now this is totally a personal chapter of the author, and the author talks about when her husband was incarcerated, and how he was sent from Delhi jail to Mathura jail, and he was treated so badly and kept in solitary confinement in Mathura jail, and then finally when he was released and all of that. Because you see, we can only imagine that if a person's husband, a family member, is arrested, and that also being properly victimized, like terribly victimized by the state, what would be happening. And at that time you have to go to the court to file appeals or to fight the case, to get bail, all of that, and she was on her own. Now the most interesting chapter and my personal favorite chapter of the book is the next one, which is the 6th chapter. It's called Swami On The Run. Now Swami is quite the hero of the whole book in my personal opinion, because he is a person who's from the Jansangh. He is a Rajya Sabha MP. He is a person who is like properly defiant of the government. He criticizes the government very nicely, like very brutally, and now let me tell you some of the things that happened. He is a Jansangh MP, and he is slated to be arrested. His name is on the list of the people who have to be arrested at the midnight by the police, because he is an opposition leader. Now when Jayaprakash Narayan and some other leaders of that big stature were arrested, the news obviously went around that opposition leaders are being arrested, and he got the news that such things are happening. So he ran from his home and he went somewhere. Now obviously the government wanted to arrest him, and he would not want to be arrested. So he had to get out of India, and he wanted to go to America and some other places, because he wants to tell to the world that what exactly is happening in the country, and that is not possible with such press censorship in India. So he wanted to go to the US, and there was no way that he could get out of India, because the government has the whole thing, the whole power in their hands. Because if he would even book a ticket, they would know that somebody called, that this opposition person is going to board this flight, and he would be caught. Now what happened was that he knew the king of Nepal. They both knew each other from Harvard, and that's how he contacted the Prime Minister of Nepal, and and also the King of Nepal. He also urged the Prime Minister of Nepal to come out openly against the Indira Gandhi government and criticize the emergency. Now the Nepal Prime Minister said that I cannot I cannot handle so much of wrath of the Indian government, so I can't do that. But the king of Nepal said that if you come to Nepal, I will ensure that our state flight, I think it's called some Royal Nepal Airlines or something like that, I will ensure that they ferry you to America. And because Subramaniam Swami was a student at Oxford and also a professor at Oxford before that, so he could easily go to US because he had a lot of contacts, and he went from India to Nepal and from Nepal to US, and then he traveled across a lot of states, I think maybe 25 or 28 states across the United States, and talked about emergency and busted all the myths that the Indira Gandhi government had tried to spread. And then he had to come back to India from the US. What he did, that he boarded a flight which was coming to India but then going to Bangkok. So he booked a ticket for Bangkok, but that flight was going via India. What he did, that when the plane landed in India, he got down there, and he says that there was so little security at that time, used to be there at that time on the airports, that barely anyone noticed him. And when there was a gate out of which he had to go, he had his Rajya Sabha MP pass, so he flashed it to a sleepy policeman, and he was out in India. And I feel all of this is very heroic. Now the most heroic thing that he did was to go to the parliament when he was to be arrested by the police as per the orders of the government. Now what he did was that he made a very elaborate plan with his wife. Now they went there, and the wife counted how many steps are to be taken so that he would reach inside the parliament, and how many steps out of the parliament. Now he went into the parliament, he went through the main gate of the parliament, and all of the police officers thought that he had signed that compromise letter, that I agree with the policies of the government and I have nothing against the government, because at that time a lot of opposition leaders did it, and that's exactly what the government also wanted, that opposition leaders should bend before the government. Now these police officers thought that if he's walking so openly towards the parliament, he obviously had signed that compromise, but he had not. So he reached inside the whole of the parliament, and what was going on was that obituaries were being announced. Now obituaries is that when a member of the parliament dies, they stand up in silence for him for 1 or 2 minutes. That's exactly what was going on. Now the last obituary was being announced by the vice president, who is also the chairman of the Rajya Sabha. So he entered the house and he raised a point of order. He said that you have forgotten to announce the death of democracy. Now the chairman of the house was stunned, and so many people who were in the government were stunned that how come he is here, because nobody can think that somebody can be so heroic, but he was there. And then exactly after he said that you have forgotten to announce the death of democracy, after that everybody had to stand up for 1 to 2 minutes to observe silence and pray for the departed souls. So that's exactly what happened, and the chairman did not ask the marshals of the parliament to arrest him. Now because he had these 1-2 minutes, he he said that I am walking out in protest. He walked out, and he exactly walked out of the gate of the parliament, and his wife had parked the car near a church, and he took that car and he went away. Now, he also had informed foreign journalists that he would be making such entry in the parliament. Now, all of the foreign journalists were there, and they covered it like properly in the international media, and the government was left properly ashamed of how they can't even take care of what they want to do. So this is one of the favorite chapters of the book, because it's like a thriller. Now what is going to happen? Now the next chapter is about Ramnath Goenka's battle. Now Ramnath Goenka is the publisher of the Indian Express. He owns it, and he has refused to bend in front of the government, and he wants to protect the freedom of the media. Now the government is also doing all kind of things to try to bend him, but there are so many cases across the nation against him, all of them forged, and he has to go from one state to another to appear in all these kind of court cases that have been filed against him. A lot of of IT raids, this kind of raid, that kind of raid, that there are financial irregularities, all of that is being done by the government, but he has not budged, and he has given a free hand to the people who are writing for his newspaper. But obviously there are censors, the government censors, and they try to censor a lot of things, but he has refused to budge, and that is the reason that he has his own battle to fight against the government. And he also reveals that he has some of the secrets of Indira Gandhi that has deterred her from arresting him, because she had already arrested a lot of journalists, a lot of opposition leaders. She could arrest him also, but he says that there is a kind of information against her that he has that has deterred her from arresting him. Now I don't know what that information is, and book also doesn't reveal it. The next chapter is the enigmatic empress. That empress obviously is Indira Gandhi. This chapter is about Indira Gandhi and her insecurities, and how the emergency was imposed by on the idea of Siddharth Shankar Ray, who was the Chief Minister of West Bengal. The next chapter is JP versus Indira. Now JP here is the main opposition leader, and Indira is the Prime Minister. Now Indira Gandhi wants that JP should if not bend before her, but should arrive at a compromise with her. Maybe that not criticize the government so much, or not lead mass movements, and not to inspire a lot of other leaders to protest against her. All of this was being is covered in this chapter. Now the next chapter is the 5-point terror. Now this Indira Gandhi had launched a 20-point program when she imposed emergency, but her son Sanjay Gandhi had another plans. He made a 5-point plan. Now according to this plan, sterilizations and also the demolition of slums, and beautification of cities, these kind of things were there in this 5-point plan. And he did a lot of things. He made it his pet project, and he did all of this to satisfy himself, or maybe prove his leadership skills or what, but he did a lot of harm to the people of India. The name of the next chapter is The Opposition versus Indira. Now in this chapter the author discusses about how so many opposition leaders were imprisoned because they simply decided not to budge before Mrs. Gandhi, and she had also incarcerated two very prominent politicians, one a Rajmata of Gwalior and another of Jaipur, and how their life was like hell in prison. But one of them budged, one of them did not, and how she made the life of any such person in her opposition a hell. And that trend can be seen today. Maybe we don't see the targeting of a particular party, but we see targeting of dissent, and that exactly has been criticized by the Delhi High Court very recently. Now the next chapter is Friar Brand Fernandes. Now Fernandes is an opposition leader and he is also on the run. He's also a very powerful union leader who has a lot of influence on the labor class of the society. He had led a railway strike against the government because the railway workers thought that they were being paid very less and it was not simply affordable to have a standard of living with that much of earnings. Now there is a very interesting story about when he was on the run. The hotel where he was staying was raided by tax authorities. Now they didn't know that he was there, so he just sat there taking his food, eating his food, and did not came out of the character, and that's how he was not even arrested. Now the name of the last chapter of the book is the announcement, and this is the final chapter where the elections are announced and a lot of the opposition leaders are out of the jail now, and this chapter tells us exactly why Indira Gandhi announced these elections, because one, she had already extended the term of parliament, so she was being seen as a person who was a dictator in the international media because she was not a legitimate leader, because after every 5 years India has to go to elections, but she had extended the term of parliament. So in one way she was an illegitimate leader of India who did not have any credibility in the eyes of international media. And the other fact being that she also asked a lot of the people who were her trusted aides, etc., that to find out that if she went to elections, would she be able to win it. Now Ivy told her that if she went to elections, she would win, and some of her Congress workers also told her that if the party went to elections, then they would win. But obviously she lost, and she lost very terribly, and I'm very happy that such leaders had to lose to learn some lessons that Indian democracy cannot be just pushed around, and you can't just do anything to the people of this country. And it's greatest thing that has happened that she was taught a lesson, but she was back, and I don't know why would people would want back a dictatorial leader who had already shown what she could do to the people of this country. But obviously she was back, people had forgiven her, good for the people. Now at last there is an epilogue. Now in this the author talks about the aftermath of emergency, and also talks about so many other people who were involved, like properly involved, who did this emergency thing who brought this emergency thing into being, like Siddharth Shankar Roy, whose idea it was to impose an emergency, Om Mehta, and then Naveen Chawla and so many other officers of the government. There's this LG of Delhi, Kishan Chand, a lot of other people who just bent before her and followed everything that she and her son Sanjay Gandhi said, and made a mockery of this country and this democracy. So in my view, this book makes for an extraordinary read that tells us the value of this Indian democracy and the values of and the value of the liberty that we have in this country. Now this liberty cannot be put at the feet of the leaders who are just trying to divide us or rule this country just for the sake of their politics. Now please be very vigilant of the rights that the constitution gives us. These are not being given to us on the mercy of these leaders. These leaders are because we are. Please read this book to understand some lessons and also relate these lessons to what's happening in the present context in the country. Next week I'll be reviewing My Gita by Devdutt Patnaik. Till then, take care, stay safe. Thank you very much for watching.